One of the things you said last week kind of got me thinking, and I think you were mostly joking, but you made the comment that Hunter could potentially be the Boba that we see in Mando. Based on kind of how Boba looks in the Mandalorian show, I wondered if maybe it was Wrecker, because he's kind of bald and chubby, and obviously Wrecker's kind of substantially bigger than the rest of them. And he's got kind of a weird looking eye, which Boba kind of had. And also, that would go back to Omega maybe being a bigger deal in that show. Wrecker seems to kind of have a special bond with Omega in this show. I don't know if that was the plan, but I guess they could maybe say Wrecker somehow or other found the gear and maybe he took over the mantle of Boba. And he's also kind of got like anger issues in this show, so that would kind of explain why Boba is like kind of angry and fights super aggressively, especially against all those stormtroopers and whatnot.
He does kind of have that like Wade Wilson face look that Boba kind of gets by the time Mandalorian happens. But I think Boba was more like tactical and smart than Wrecker.
We also kind of got to keep in mind, like, it's potentially possible that Wrecker gained more tact. I mean, there are still 7 episodes of this show to come besides what we've seen, and also a number of years between now and that Mando show. So it's possible that Wrecker got smarter or whatnot. I mean, I think most people are operating under the assumption that the Boba that we saw in Attack of the Clones and the Boba that we saw get sold into sex slavery and whatnot, I think everybody's just assuming somehow or other he got out of that, and, like, it's that one. I don't know if anybody else is thinking that it's a different person taking the suit and taking up the mantle, but I do like that idea, and just kind of based on how Wrecker looks and kind of how Boba looks in that show, I guess it would make sense. I also was thinking about a potential connection with Fennec and either Omega and also possibly the Bad Batch. When they were on Topoka City or whatever, Shan says to Cat Bane, we go way back. And I think that's possibly partially referring to when they saw each other on Pantora. But it also kind of got me thinking, is it possible that Fennec Shan somehow has something to do with Jango Fett's DNA? And somehow she knows that Omega is connected in the same way? And I'm wondering if they have some sort of genetic or DNA connection that Fennec is referencing. And I guess that would also make sense why Nala Se trusts her to be the bounty hunter to go find Omega and get her back. Potentially, Fennec Shan started off as some sort of genetic alteration project. That's sort of a extra reference to them going way back, not just jokingly saying they go way back like a couple weeks ago on Pantora.
Yeah, that kind of hints probably that they are part of some like either she's a Jango clone or like she's related to Jango in some way. It's only the Grand Republic army that would have needed the Jango template for that specific order. They have other people from around the universe that they're probably cloning people from, and other secret cloning projects, and Fennec might be part of that, so like she could have been around to know when Omega was being incubated, so they're probably going to expand upon that.
My only other things I had from that episode, obviously I liked the episode. I liked that it centered around mostly Cad Bane. I don't care super a lot for Fennec, but I mean, I guess that's cool. Like, her and Cad had a decent little encounter. My main thing was, like, I'm glad Cad Bane survived yet another episode. I hope he kind of stays alive, and I hope they keep kind of enhancing his story forward. Do you think those tanks on that planet were a reference to Snoke? I kind of think it was just random other experiments that were either failed or were on hiatus, but it's possible that that's a hint at Snoke. It seems more so to go along with just other Kaminoan alteration projects, and I think it also is a little bit of an Easter egg as to why the scientist guy in Mando had the Kaminoan patch on his coat.
I'm sure they could leave themselves all kinds of backdoors to like tie Snoke into that. It just looks like a generic sci-fi lab experiment tanks. And it was like a generic, well, it could have been Kaminoan or something, but it looked like a generic, like the archetypal alien with like the big bug eyes and like gray and bald and skinless that you see everywhere.
I also think it's possible that we could see Nala Se or Lama Su or both either in Book of Boba Fett or a future Mando season, assuming that they're not killed off in this show.
Yeah, especially if Boba Fett is like a bunch of prequels that lead up to where he ends up at the end of Mando Season 2.
As far as the Loki show, to get things started, my main thing was I'm wondering if there's any kind of significance to Sylvie's horn being missing.
It's missing in the comics. I think when Loki's a kid and he's like an agent of Asgard and like the left horn breaks off because he's on the side of right at that point. So I think they're hinting and foreshadowing that like Sylvie's the good guy right now.
Okay, because I wondered if it was just kind of some sort of meta gaff, like if they somehow or other like broke the prop or something and then they were just wearing it like that, or if it actually had some sort of major significance as to why it was missing. What are your thoughts on potentially Shuma Gorath actually being the main villain that's behind all this? I've kind of been reading and agreeing with some speculation that it was actually Shuma Gorath that was controlling Wanda the whole time in the WandaVision show. So Shuma Gorath is going to be kind of the main villain in not necessarily Spider-Man, but probably the Doctor Strange movie and possibly the Spider-Man thing. And I think this Loki show directly ties in with WandaVision, Doctor Strange, and possibly even Spider-Man.
Yeah, I was reading that they could have Shuma Gorath show up in Doctor Strange 2, and like he could be what's behind WandaVision. He could be manipulating the Kangs into doing things for him. One thing is, remember in Doctor Strange 1 when he's fighting Caecilius in the little museum and he's got him trapped and he says, "Time is the enemy of all of us, Mr. Doctor, and we can escape time and we can live forever if we only serve Dormammu." So, like, I think it could be Dormammu manipulating things and trying to close off time or, like, absorb all the timelines for himself and then, like, absorb them into the dark dimension or something.
The other major kind of reveal that we got in episode 3 was that Sylvie led on that everybody that works for the Time Variance or whatever, the Timekeepers Authority, whatever it's called, they're also just variants that somehow or other have been brainwashed or whatever. They've been captured and then basically just repurposed into working for this TVA. So that kind of makes me think more along the lines of what you talked about a couple episodes ago, where you think Kang is kind of behind the whole TVA. And so I'm wondering if Ravonna Renslayer is also some sort of variant, or if she's in the know and if she is fully aware of the fact that all of her little like TVA henchmen that go around correcting the timeline in the way that she wants it and or how Kang wants it. I'm thinking, like, did Kang, like you said, put her in charge and so she's fully aware of everybody being different variants that they've taken off the timeline and repurposed them, or if she too is actually just a variant and then she was given like more of a responsibility than basically going through and basically being a time brute, for lack of a better word. That seems like mostly what the TVA are. And then that kind of makes me think like Owen Wilson's character is probably just another one of those time brutes. He's not really fully aware of the situation. He was just a variant taken from the 90s. And so that would explain why he's really into jet skis or whatever. He was a part of Earth. He might have just been a human guy, just like how that C-20 or whatever, C-30, whatever their name was just a random girl on Earth. She had a strong will. She was able to kind of resist the mind control at first, but obviously Sylvie was stronger-willed and was able to dig deep and find a memory for her to manipulate. But I thought that was kind of interesting, and I think that could be a major thing or a major player for at least the rest of this show, if not further down the MCU timeline, where we could possibly see Kang in this show, or he could possibly show up in either Spider-Man or Doctor Strange because of what you were saying. He could possibly be controlling this and setting this up for his whole goal.
So she's also got that Timekeeper helmet in her. That was one of the things on her shelf, and it said A23 because she shows up in Avengers 23 for the first time. So that could indicate that she was once a timekeeper, so that she is a variant that maybe superseded the original or an original one and like tricked her way up or conquered her way up to the top of the organization.
So do you think she knows that everybody that's kind of working under her is a variant that was repurposed? Or do you think that she's just another one that was repurposed and then just given more responsibility than the Owen Wilsons of the team?
She's probably figured it out that everybody else is a variant.
The last thing I had was that the final little part of episode 3, the little area that they were in on Lamentis, it gave me major Final Fantasy VII vibes. It kind of looked exactly like Sector 8, especially from the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I don't know if that was just like an Easter egg or whatever, or if it's just a coincidence. I also noticed kind of a Portland Trailblazers logo on one of the either stores or buildings. I don't know if that was just like an Easter egg, if one of them's just like a fan of that team or something, or if that might be something more significant. Do you think I'm just reaching here, or do you think that could actually be
They've
something?
probably hidden all kinds of little like messages and like the names of writers and stuff in the little alien languages on the windows. But it's funny that they're all humans, but out there they like speak in runes like that. Or write in runes like that, but they still speak English.
I guess, kind of going back in the episode a little bit, when they were on the train and having the conversation, obviously this episode was mostly just like character development. There wasn't a ton of plot development other than her reveal of what the Timekeeper brutes really are. I thought Loki's dagger metaphor was really funny, and I actually thought it made more sense than Sylvie gave him credit.
Yeah, that stuff was all funny, but I think it was also making fun of the grief is love persisting thing from WandaVision. They sounded like a bunch of high schoolers writing like emo poetry when they were coming up with those. Also, British people arguing is way more amusing than it should be.
There's something that I've read where non-American born actors have a different delivery and a different sense of humor. So, like, when there's, like, an American director and, like, a European actor, sometimes there's, like, a bit of a disconnect because their sense of humor is sometimes more subtle. I don't know if it takes, like, more of an intelligent audience member to kind of get it. Yeah, I think that's interesting, seeing, like, the different acting styles of people of, I guess, different backgrounds. And, like, I kind of said after the first episode, and it kind of goes without saying, Tom Hiddleston has been awesome this whole time. It's essentially a Tom Hiddleston monologue, and then everyone else is kind of there. But the actress that plays Sylvie, I think, is doing fine. Like, I think Tom Hiddleston's kind of carrying the whole thing, but she's good in support of him, and she kind of carries it a little bit. I was a little bit surprised that Owen Wilson's character wasn't at all involved in this episode. I kind of went out of my way to say I think he's going to be a big deal, but now that Sylvie said that they're just basically variants that are fairly insignificant other than the fact that they were repurposed, and also kind of going back to that finding your glorious purpose talking point within the show, I almost think he's kind of insignificant now, but I guess that could change, and my thoughts on that could change.
So the next episode is probably going to start with them right where they're at, and a bunch of TVA people show up and like pull them out through like the portals and arrest them. And Sylvie's probably going to enchant Owen Wilson next and like knock him out of his mind wipe.
Do you think that Sylvie is Enchantress at this point, or do you think it's something else? I'm still kind of thinking that it's Enchantress.
She's basically Enchantress.
So is it the kind of thing where it's like Enchantress, but they're not going to go so far as to call her that? Or do you think we'll get that reveal at some point?
It's just like what they did with the Scarlet Witch, where they didn't actually call her that until like the end of her series. And you don't really notice because like you know who the character is. They were making all this reference to like, oh, how do you do the enchantments? Just enchant the guard. Just so they're going in that direction.
Do you think she'll last beyond this show? Like, do you think she'll make an appearance on the big screen, so to speak? And also, do you think that we're going to get Kang in this show or no?
Probably not in this show. I think he's supposed to debut in Ant-Man 3. Because the quantum realm is like the key to time travel, and that's his thing. I think that the TVA, their like sacred timeline is based on kneecapping people who are competition to them. So like all the Thanos stuff and like wiping out half the universe and everything was okay because it ultimately got Tony Stark off the table, who was smart enough to figure out time travel, so he could like interfere with them. They're trying to get rid of people that can interfere with their control over time, which is why Reed Richards and his family haven't shown up yet. And we're probably going to find that they've been trapped in some alternate, the negative zone or something, and they're going to come back. Not in this show, obviously, but by the end of Phase 4.
Yeah, I think it's been confirmed that the Fantastic Four are going to be kind of the closing point of Phase 4. Do you think when they...
That's going to be a post-credit tease, like they appear.
Do you think they're just going to assume everybody knows who they are, or do you think they're going to do a bunch of character development for them or try to redo their origin story? Because obviously they've attempted that a bunch of different times, and you kind of referenced it, that all those prior ones are going to be just meta gags, or those were like disruptions of the timeline, like versions of them that were nerfed. So like when they bring them into the MCU, do you think they're just going to assume everybody knows exactly who they are, or do you think they're going to...
Yeah, just like they did with Spider-Man. They didn't like really give a new Spider-Man origin. It was just already done. These characters that other studios had and they've like made movie after movie of, they can just plop in. If they do characters that weren't there before, they can introduce that, and they'll give a little like explanation. They're not gonna like retread it all. They don't have to.
Do you have any thoughts on what we'll possibly get in episode 10 of Bad Batch?
You said there was like 7 episodes left of this season, right? So I feel like they've been building up to some stuff. They're gonna like do a couple side quests again and like stall to like build back up to the end.
The fact that I found out that there's 16 episodes planned for at least this season, if not for potentially additional seasons, I still think that this is going to be a one-off thing. But the fact that there are 16 total and we've only gotten 9, I still am kind of holding out hope that we're going to get some type of Maul arc in this show. And I almost am hoping for like a Cad Bane and Maul team up somehow. I don't know how likely that is, but in season 7 of Star Wars The Clone Wars, we essentially got 4 episodes of Maul, basically. So I think there's still potential for that, of at least 4-episode arc involving him. I also wonder if we're going to get any Grand Admiral Thrawn in this, which would obviously be prior to when he showed up in the Rebels show. But this would be probably right around the time when the Empire was recruiting him. And so I don't know if they would give us any of the early Thrawn or like Thrawn comic type content that were in the first, I guess, trilogy of Thrawn novels. That would be cool. Or if we just got some sort of cameo of him would be cool.
Or the people related to him, like the Eli Vanto guy as a kid, him getting like recruited into the Empire.